We're good. Okay. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Development Corporation for June 12th, 2024. I'm going to do the Development Corporation first so we get it out of the way, and then we'll go to the IDA. I know we have a full room, so we want to proceed apace. And the first item is privilege of the floor. We will receive privilege of the floor for both the Development Corporation and the IDA. I'll check in to see if anybody came in afterwards for the IDA portion. Our first speaker is Teresa Alt. Welcome.
Okay. So I'm Teresa Alt, 206 Eddy Street in the city of Ithaca. Sorry I couldn't attend the hearing about the Meadow, a project worthy of support. I did read the minutes, noted that they are misstated, the sort of mistake that I often make when I use a past set of minutes as a template for a new meeting. Dylan Watros had some sensible concerns about staffing for supportive housing. I think the IAED has relationships with job training programs and that this field might be a candidate. As for the new application from Southworks, I want to note some history. Another project that you have supported, all affordable Asteri in central downtown, originally proposed 218 units. Unfortunately, the market rate building that you also had supported, Harold Square, or more precisely, the company Harold's Holding LLC, sued because Asteri, with an equal right to build, was going to block the view from Harold Square windows. Asteri agreed to reduce the size of the building, cutting down to 181 units. Harold's Holding grandly announced that the affordable units would be replaced by units at Chainworks, which is now Southworks. Then Harold's Holding sold Chainworks. We now see that Southworks plans to build 20% affordable units. I hope you will insist that they make that 20%, which equals 218 units, plus the 37 units lost from Asteri, so that you will insist on a total of 220 affordable units in the project. I think you have the power to insist on this, even if Harold's Holding didn't inform the buyers of their promise.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Jennifer Tavares.
Hi, everyone. Boy, I miss coming to IDA meetings. It's been a while. I don't get to come very often. I'm here on behalf of the Chamber to express our support for the Southworks project. I'm so excited that this project is finally coming before the Industrial Development Agency. It feels like we've all been waiting a very long time for that. This transformative project, with its size, scope, and potential community benefit, comes along once in a generation and likely cannot be completed without a partnership with local municipalities and the IDA. This project includes adaptive reuse, a vision that is far more beneficial to our community than a tear down or rebuild would be. This project supports our environmental and sustainability goals with massive investment to date, plans for the entire site to be net zero development. Infrastructure updates and investments, including trail connections, are also going to benefit the community. As many of you are aware, our Housing Task Force recommends the support of this proposed project with its 915 proposed housing units, which will include at least 20% affordable units and additional workforce housing should the economics work on the project. We cannot delay in building more housing to address our shortages in Tompkins County. This project may create thousands of construction and permanent jobs for our area, as well as stimulate microenterprise, small business development, and incubation. It further supports our workforce development strategies, particularly around construction workforce needs. Projects like Southworks will help create community and can become an economic hub to our region. This project has real potential to attract businesses, residents, and visitors alike. And if you've ever visited a similar project in another community, you will likely understand why. Redeveloped former industrial spaces are magical. They are awe-inspiring. It is sometimes hard to make the leap from what we see today at Southworks to what this site can become, yet there are numerous examples that we can point to. There's Chelsea Market in New York City, Industry City in Brooklyn, Tin City in Paso Robles, California, just a few of my favorites. There's many other examples out there. We can also point to the South Hill Business Campus, which is a highly successful redevelopment project which supports a vibrant artist, small and large business ecosystem just up the road. With its substantial request, which I know can seem large, if you just look at the numbers, I want to point to the fact that this request is reasonable based on the value of the projected investment. This local investment, which is requested as a part of this overall project structure, is not cash or grant, but based on projection of full tax revenue on something that might never be built without it. It would result in an increase in property taxes far beyond what the site is generating now. Even with the proposed pilot schedule, local property tax payments will increase significantly. Once the entire project is placed under pilot, about $45 million in net new property taxes are projected over 20 years, which is not something that our community can really do without, I'm sure. The requested assistance will help incentivize over $500 million in investment in our community, in local construction trades, in affordable and workforce housing, in mixed use, commercial development, in sustainable sites and green spaces, and in new infrastructure, all of which will be far more beneficial to us than not participating in this visionary and transformative project. So I encourage you to give this a really hard look. I know this is going to be a process. I know this is just the beginning. I look forward to following along as you go through this over the next several months. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Dylan Watros.
All right, please excuse my shaky voice. So my name is Dylan. I've been a Tompkins County resident for my entire life. I've lived in the town of Ithaca since the age of 6, and I've worked professionally in emergency services since 2011, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself and not my places of employment. And I'm here to speak against 114 North Meadow, and basically because I think that it's going to create a larger tax burden on our county residents, and I think that RSS and the developer CDS are making a lot of promises that they can't necessarily keep. One of my first considerations when I saw this was I tried to do some research on RSS, and I found that they operate housing in 12 other counties, 8 of which are significantly larger than ours. So in comparison, the Tompkins County population is just over 100,000 people, where they operate in Westchester, which is 1 million, Orange County 400,000, 300,000 in Albany County, just under 300,000 in Dutchess, and so forth, all the way down to Schenectady County, all of which are larger than ours. And it seemed a little bit concerning to me that in our county, which is going to be the 9th out of 12 or 13 counties that they operate housing in, we're going to get the largest supportive housing building. That doesn't really make sense to me. Why we're going to be getting the largest one when they operate in counties 10 to 3 to 10 times the size of ours. So my fear is that this building will also become a place that doesn't help our residents, but turns into a space that's going to offload residents from other counties, creating, bringing these people who require the supportive housing and making them our county's responsibility. So, this happened in 2018 in Broome County when, they were going to take legal action against NYC because the city was actually moving residents up here or up to Broome County and basically making them, the Broome County's problem. And, I think this is seen in Art House. I was speaking with somebody familiar with the Art House supportive housing, and they said that a good chunk of the residents that were moving into the 40 supportive units in that place were actually from the New York City area. So, we basically now are taking responsibility for people coming here from 230 miles away. My second is concerning giving this, the tax abatements, is the amount that the services that these buildings require are going to, burden our emergency services. So since 2022, Art House, which is a similar style housing model, has required over 1,500 emergency responses from either the police department, the fire department, or, the ambulance service. We're going to basically be giving them tax abatements, which are, supposed to be covering these services. So when we do that, that burden for their services, it now falls on the rest of our county's constituents, and that's not fair to them, especially if they're going to be moving people from other counties into our county to house this place. And then the other thing is, I think the location for this building isn't necessarily the greatest. There's it's on the main two thoroughfares through Ithaca, Route 13 and Route 79. They experience heavy. Is that my time? All right, I guess.
Go ahead and finish up, Dylan.
Yeah, I guess my last point, I think, would be, let's see what the better one would be, sorry.
Does he have much more?
Okay, my last point, the biggest thing is I think that they're making a promise that they can't keep. I think their goal of 9 to 12 staff members on site 24/7, or at least with one on site 24/7, is great, and sounds awesome. But Art House was supposed to have just 3 staff members on site with one 24/7, and they do not do that. I've been there on multiple occasions, trying to, looking all over and in the middle of the night for staff members to help us solve problems, and they are just not there. So I think them promising that they can staff this many people is just not feasible when, our house literally is a portion of that, and they can't do it. So thank you. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Appreciate the comment. Tim Downs. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. I'm here actually to speak on both items, so I appreciate you guys aligning the agenda for me. So I only had to come once. And I will try to be brief because I'm going to have to wear 2 different hats. The first hat is on Meadow and Seneca. I wear my resident of the city of Ithaca. I live at 602 West Seneca, right across the street from the property. And conceptually, the project sounds great. And we all want success. Practically, I worry about it being successful, and what we don't want is another art house. And one case manager to 7 clients is really rough. And I feel like, Dylan, it's going to be a drain on the resources. And what happens when they can't live up to that? And what happens if it starts to falter? And when it starts to fail, what can they do? And adding back the tax abatement isn't going to help. It's just going to further the cycle. So that's very concerning. One of the things I know in New Jersey that when I worked down there they did a performance bond. And they required the developer to get a bond that had to be held for 5 years after delivery. And if for whatever reason they didn't live up to their obligation, the municipality had the ability to draw on that bond to shore up the services. And to me, if we want success, it's not tax them and make them close. It's about how do we ensure that. So I would ask this group, I don't know what they're legally allowed, that's why you have your lawyer here to figure that out, what can be done to help ensure that happens and make sure the resources are there to do it. So take that hat off. Put on my second hat, I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Ithaca College. And I'm here in support of Southworks. We are their biggest neighbor. We are right across the street, and we couldn't be happier to finally have a partner there. We've met with many times. We've looked at their plans. We are in full support of the development in that area and really helping bring Southworks and the South Hill as a destination and really enlivening the Ithaca area and having multiple resources there. So for that, I know it's a larger number. Seeing them with the CFO, it will more than pay for itself, so I'm in full support of the Southworks project. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the Development Corporation or the IDA at this time? All right. Seeing none, let's... Sorry.
I didn't get to the microphone quick enough.
Oh, have you filled out a blue sheet?
I didn't. I walked in just as the meeting was starting.
Could you give me your name?
Brian Noteboom. I'm a representative for the Carpenters Local.
Okay, and you understand the rules? You can't swear
Yeah,
at us.
I've
You get
spoke-
3 minutes.
He's spoken before.
I've
Okay.
spoken before.
Go
I've
ahead.
Been
Go
here
ahead.
before. Know Heather well. I'm also on the Tompkins County Area Development Board as well. So I will be quick. I'll be brief. I just want to make the IDA board aware of some complicated things. So Southworks, great project. Thankful for developers and the IDAs coming together on multiple projects in Tompkins County to create jobs. Local labor requirement, another great requirement, but I know there's been attempts to monitor this work with the local labor, and what I would like to focus on mostly is to make the board aware and everyone aware that wage theft does happen. When workers are exploited, they're coming from out of area. I'll give an example, the Asteri project, another good project, but a company out of Albany, the Vicino Group, has used workers that are being exploited. Wage theft is happening, did happen. I know a project is ending. Ironworks on State Street, company called Fox Builders out of Syracuse. Workers were also exploited there, paid as 1099 workers, which is another way to circumvent state taxes. So just my concern is I know this isn't a county issue, Tompkins County issue, this is more of a state issue, but the New York State Task Force, which under previous governorship we had, is no longer supported. So I just feel like I need to make people aware that wage theft does happen. State level, they need to come forward and enforce this more because workers are being exploited, not paid properly, paid cash. Just a lot of things are happening out there in the working world. And I know there's a monitoring process, but it takes years for that data to come forward. So I know Heather and the IDA has worked with that. Kurt Anderson has worked as well on some of that monitoring. But when workers are maybe not having the right documentation or coming from Rochester, Albany, Syracuse, kind of hard to track them. So it happens mostly in the carpentry industry. So that's the industry that I represent. Carpenters Local 277, right here at Cornell, Catherine Commons, many projects we're working on, but there's many we are not as well. So thank you for your time and appreciate the moment.
Thank you. I see we have somebody online. Is it Robert Kane?
Yes, it is. My name is Robert Kane, Director of Real Estate Development with CSD Housing, partnering with RSS on the Meadow. We're based out of Rochester. We do work with nonprofits like RSS across the state. I would like to comment a little bit about some of the comments we've heard, if it's all right with you.
You can either use your 3 minutes now, or we're going to have this as an agenda item. If you want to remain at the meeting, we could talk about it then. Either way.
We'll wait for the agenda item.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the agency? Okay. Let's move forward with our agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda of the Development Corporation? And I think I gave the date. This is the meeting of June 12th, 2024. Our one item of business is the Block 14 funding request, and we considered this last week. John, do you have anything you want to put on the record?
I will be recusing myself from this conversation as a board member of the DILDC2, which is the requesting entity.
Okay, we'll give you a moment to step aside. And just for the benefit of those present, we considered this last month and actually voted to approve, but then decided we wanted to wait full approval for submission of the legal documents, and that's happened. I think we should probably get a motion to put it on the floor, and then I have something I wanted to share with the members. But could I get a motion? Jeff moves. Duxon seconds. Okay. I'll start the discussion just to let you know that I received a text and then had a telephone call with Dan Klein of the Tompkins County Legislature. Not sure whether he was communicating as the chair or as another member, but he may have reached out to some of you as well. He was asking if we could delay this another month before we gave approval for this loan. His reasoning for doing that was he would like to see the Development Corporation and come and talk to the county before we voted. There have been communications between the Development Corporation and the county, but certainly the county has not been directly asked for any commitment. I responded to him that I think that what we're doing here today is really allowing us to gather information to move the project forward, that we need to make the best decision we can, and we can't really do that without doing the research and the studies that this funding would provide, and that would benefit both the county and the IDA. But I did want to raise this and just allow the committee members to think about it. Do you want to delay this further? I have concerns if we do that, in that we've already delayed this project. It's under a clock because of the options, and I'm not necessarily inclined to wait longer. But Ann?
Yes, as the other county legislature on this board, I just wanted to speak up. I also spoke with Rich earlier today, and then about this, and then he spoke with Dan, Dan Klein, who's the chair of our legislature. We have had discussions at the county, and we haven't decided anything except there was, I guess, a consensus that we wanted to find out more information. And we know we're under no commitment whatsoever. And so I do see this as the next step is the process is to help gather more information. So I would like to keep it on the agenda today.
Does anybody else wish to be heard? Duxon.
I guess I would say even without the county portion, it's a significant plot of land with community benefit, and that, like you said, that process of examining whether, basically doing the feasibility study on that, can't proceed without this, so I continue to support it. I also was looking for a signal from the county reps to see how you guys felt, and that also helps, so thank you.
Yeah, there is a scenario that's quite possible that we would go through this exercise and the county would say, no, we don't want to be involved. That could happen either way. I think it would just happen later if it was going to happen. But there already have been county actions related to the building that is the Office for the Aging, indicating that that office would move into a new center of government building to be built, which would then, I believe the resolution actually said, we would put that property on the market, that portion of it, not all of the block, but I think we've already made some indication that we're planning to make changes in that property. So I don't feel uncomfortable at all doing this. I guess the one item I would say is that if in the coming weeks it turns out that there's a consensus at the county legislature that there's no interest in doing this, we'd revisit with the members of the LDC to talk about, do we really want to continue spending loaned money here? But I think that's a conversation for another day. Does that make sense to the members? Okay. Further discussion before we vote. Has everybody had a chance to review the document and you're satisfied? Okay. I'll call the roll. Duxon? Oh, Heather.
I just had some clarification and discussion about the loan agreement. I mean, generally when the IDA or the Development Corporation is providing funding for a project, they're going to ask for invoices and then disperse. There was some concern about the IDA having to disperse a lot of funds through a lot of checks, so making it in larger tranches, which I think the intent, I just want to clarify and make sure the intent is correct in the documents, that invoices would be submitted, the IDA would go ahead, or the Development Corporation, excuse me, would go ahead and disperse funds in installments of $30,000 or more as invoices are received. There was one word in the loan agreement that said monthly tranches. I'm not sure it's going to happen monthly, so if it's friendly, I'm just going to have them remove the word monthly, but the key point was the $30,000 or more at a time.
Is that friendly?
So
To not constrain it to monthly?
I'll amend it to that. Since I'm on the board, I'll amend what Heather just said, and so,
Okay.
Is that friendly? You and
Okay. All right, that's fine. I think we're ready to vote. Duxon?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Ann?
yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So good. We will pay attention to that, and we'll certainly communicate and try to figure out what the county's position is as we go forward and adjust. So, thank you, Gary. All right. Moving forward, I do not have a chair's report for the Development Corporation. Staff report.
I have no staff report.
All right, we have minutes from May 8th, 2024. Could I get a motion to put those on the floor? Todd moves. And seconds. Thank you. Questions or comments on the minutes? Right? I'm going to do this by a show of hands. All in favor of the minutes? Right? We're good? Great. Any other business to come before the Development Corporation this month? Seeing none, I'd take a motion to adjourn. Todd moves and seconds. All those in favor? Okay. We are adjourned. Now I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Industrial Development Agency for June 12th, 2024. And again, welcome to everybody. And just in case anybody has come in the room, we have had privilege of the floor. Is there anybody who wishes to address the development or the IDA that has not had a chance to do so? Okay. Are there any additions to the agenda? All right. Okay, let's move on to our business. The first item is Meadow on Seneca, RSS approval. And we have the authorizing resolution. Could I get a motion to put that on the floor? John moves and seconds. All right. Discussion?
This is to put on the floor to discuss.
Well, it's on the floor. So if you have something to say, now's the time. John?
I just wanted to address, I guess, some of the things that we heard earlier. I think that we have certainly seen, as a community, some pretty real challenges associated with the Art House project. And I think that there is perhaps a tendency to try to paint, supportive housing projects and the impacts associated with the opioid crisis and houselessness and all these other things with a pretty broad brush. And I think that it's likely the case that, projects such as this one may be a little messy because there's some pretty real crises that people are facing when they're experiencing houselessness, and that might have impacts. At the same time, I think this is like absolutely critical work as a community. We're facing multiple crises, just a housing crisis in general, and also, the outcomes of people living unhoused and all the other things they have to do just to survive are not beneficial for our community. And I think this is important work to be doing. So I think it is important for us to proceed in spite of the potential messiness that might come with it. I am heartened by the presentation we had from RSS and the work that they're clearly trying to do in order to make sure that they're providing adequate case management. And I think that this is something that we definitely need to move forward on with all due haste for the good of the community overall.
Okay. Todd?
With a couple of the people that talked there, I agree completely with, I think Mr. Watchers was talking about what he sees over there at the Art House. My business is close by there on Malone Drive, and it's just, it's terrible. I mean, I got a truckload of garbage in the back of my truck. I got to get a police permit for so I can get rid of illegal dumping on my property. It's out of control. I am concerned about hearing the other person talking about a 7-to-1 ratio on a caseload. That's a lot. I don't know how that's going to be sustainable. I worry about that. I do have some real concerns, especially in a residential area like that. You got houses right across the road. It's, I know I'd be very, if I'd lived there, I'd be very, very concerned myself too.
Okay, Jeff.
I'm hoping we can hear from Robert and from Lauren, who's looks like they're online, to maybe address some of the comments.
Certainly. Yeah, I was going to hear from IDA members first, but
okay.
But if we're ready,
yeah, I'd love to hear from them.
Robert.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us. Very much appreciate the opportunity, guys. So, you know, coming into this locality close to a year and a half ago, obviously everyone had concerns over Art House, and I hate to keep pointing to one specific project. It's not the best, I guess, way to approach things, in my opinion, from like a peer-to-peer developer perspective. But since it is the case study that everyone is focused on, you know, I want you all to know and the community to know that we and RSS actively connected with outreach throughout the community, talked with a lot of different stakeholders in the community about our house, the challenges it had, the successes it has, the downfalls, the upsides. And so we not only did that, but we toured a number of different other properties in the community to really figure out what made the most sense for the Meadow on Seneca. And ultimately it came to, you know, the conglomeration of the right design, the right defensible space, the right outreach, the right communication connection points, the right security and safety plan, the right staffing structure, the right sponsor. There's a lot of unique characteristics here that this development is that others in the community are not. From my perspective, working with organizations across the entire state of New York, RSS is unique in that it actually has a much tighter caseload than most do. And in this particular project, we do have unique resources that no others in the state do have. You know, we were recently awarded OMH capital dollars to provide mandated 24/7 coverage, which is a bond by DASNY. There'll be ongoing compliance, so rest assured that there'll be ongoing compliance with that regard, and it's mandated by the funding source that we have that other projects in the Ithaca community do not have. We also have other funding sources that make this more unique in its own regard to bring in more staffing to make it appropriate for the population here. As a respect to the location, we feel this is the most optimal location for this type of housing with this demographic, largely in part due to the public transportation, the job opportunities, the connection to amenities, resources in the community, and then also the referral network as it relates to the continuum of care. You know, the comment about folks coming in and busing in from out of the community, we hear that quite frankly everywhere we go. And honestly, it all comes down to the point of entry and the intake process, and it's a local challenge, right? The continuum of care receives referrals from healthcare providers, homeless providers, folks that come in the point of entry, and then get referred out to care managers. And then finally, you know, as it relates to our design and the safety of this, you know, we've got a very well secured, safe plan that we're connecting with the police department over to make sure that we have every single corner of this place blanketed and conveyed with the police department to make sure that there aren't any other considerations that we don't know. For example, at Art House, there's multiple points of entry. You know, there's multiple points of hiding. There's multiple places of congregation. In this place, there's one point of entry into the building from a nuts and bolts perspective. So we took that to heart at the very beginning to connect with a lot of individuals, to look at, you know, the pros and cons of that building and other properties, and try to make this as a income mix of a property as possible, so that it's a very healthy set of demographics. I'll pass it to Lauren to talk a little bit more about the case management and the care coordination as it relates to the Meadow.
Thank you. Lauren?
Hi, everyone. So I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Rob just had to say. RSS has 40 years of experience in providing mental health services across a wide variety of communities. We do believe in having as small of a caseload as possible in order to support the individuals that we serve. We also believe that that allows the case managers to build relationships with the individuals that they're serving and ultimately support them to best meet their needs. A 7-to-1 caseload, I know that that has been a concern to a few folks that have spoken recently. 7-to-1 ratio for caseloads is actually quite small, especially given the fact that the case managers and the individuals that are living will be right on site. So the case managers are available to individuals every day, 24 hours a day. An individual may not necessarily meet with their case manager. Their case manager obviously is not going to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but they will have access to somebody. So we are really trying to enhance the model of case management that we're offering at this program.
Okay. Todd.
Can I ask you, Lauren, what are the qualifications for these case managers? What's their credentials? What do they bring to the table? I'm just curious. I know people that have worked at some of these places, and they're just. I know some teachers that have worked at some of these places, and they're just handing out medicine with no medical training, no nothing. And so I'm just curious, what kind of.
Yeah, so we do look for individuals who have experience in the field and who have provided support services in the past. As far as handing out medications with no education, it sounds like we don't administer medications, which is more of a medical term where you do have to have medical training and a specific actual medication training to do that. We supervise medications in some instances to help individuals just to make sure that they're taking them the right way. The individuals that'll be residing here won't necessarily have that level of need that I think that you may be referring to. But back to the staff qualifications, we really focus on having individuals that have worked with the populations that we've served in the past, usually somebody who has an understanding of the community that they're within, understanding where they may need to refer individuals to or how they can best support them within the community. Our supervisors and all of our staff go through a great deal of training even just as part of our agency, and then more specific training to the individuals that they're serving as well. So we do look, we look for specific individuals that are going to be able to build a rapport with the folks that we're serving.
Ann.
And I know we've mentioned Art House, several times with this project, and it's come up before when we've talked about units like this. But what we don't often talk about are all the other successes that we have here in the community, that when you do have enough support and enough guidance, and I take into account that, you said 40 years of experience in doing this, we've had success in this community with newer endeavors too. And are they perfect? No, but what I call success, maybe somebody else wouldn't, but success is for most of the people most of the time is really, I think, what we're going for. And so I will support this. I think a 7-to-1 ratio is really good. I used to work in healthcare and in supportive homes, and so I think that's a pretty good ratio for people who are living independently.
Thank you, Ann. I guess I'll take a turn. Wearing another hat, I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee, so I spend a lot of time thinking about these issues of all of the ancillary problems we've had in our community related to drug addiction, alcoholism, mental health issues, and particularly the encampments. And obviously we need to do something about that. But I get very frustrated where we sort of try to set policy by slogan, and in this case I'd mentioned the term housing first. We do want housing, and we want to get people out of tents and into some sort of housing, either shelter, transitional housing, supported housing, and eventually independent housing. And it happens, but why I don't like the slogan of housing first, saying don't set preconditions, just give people housing, is it's tremendously important what comes second. You can't say housing first without seriously considering what is the second step, what kind of support are you providing, and that really, I think, dictates the success or failure of a particular building. And looking at the supportive structure that's proposed here, this is what we want. This is absolutely the direction you need to go if you're going to be serious about housing people that are just not ready for it right away and need to move on that continuum to get to a more permanent place in their lives and to get help in all sorts of different ways. As an IDA, this isn't directly our responsibility to look at the social services aspects of this, but it is built into the proposal, and this is something that I presume we would be looking at in years to come in terms of, we do an annual review of, we call it the jobs report, but also, you know, where are these projects? Did they get completed? Are they doing what they said they were going to do? And in this case, the supportive elements are critical to, I believe, what we're going to vote on in a few minutes. So we'll be looking at that, and we should be. But I'm excited about this if it is done the way you guys say it's going to be done. This is absolutely what we need to build in our community to do a better job. So, yeah. Ann.
I just wanted to clarify what today is in this county is meant by Housing First. It's with whatever supports they need. But I know over the years it's just
that's my problem. It just doesn't
that's
convey
how
the rest of it.
I think people, you know, thought of it, or maybe that was what was done. I'm not sure, but I just know here and now. And, you know, we could have folks from the continuum of care come and talk with us or the county. But it is about whatever services they need and whatever level of assistance they need. We don't have every level here yet in the county, and at the county and with the city, we're working on that. And this is one of the pieces, though, which is critical.
Thanks, Ann. Yes, and the problem I have with the term is it doesn't say enough, you know, that you really need to be saying more. Duxon.
I totally agree with Ann and Rich, and I'll just add from a city perspective that we have been, rightfully so, been given significant pressure to improve the conditions for some of the most vulnerable members of our community. We've committed to a housing surge, of which this is only one portion, and so I feel very personally committed to the mission that projects like this are hoping to serve. And yeah, they're not perfect. These are an extremely difficult population of people to work with. I mean, most humans are difficult to work with one way or another. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. We have residents and business owners and people who visit who are expecting us to take action, and we've gotten, for better or worse, national attention for it. And so I think it's really important that we do what we can. So I will also be supporting this.
Okay. Anybody else? Are we ready to vote? Todd.
I think it's a great concept, great project. I've had family members, unfortunately, a sister-in-law lost to suicide. I've had close friends I've lost to suicide. I've had a lot of friends of mine who's lost children to drugs or suicide. So it's definitely need help here. We definitely need something going on. But I don't care. I don't like the fact that it's in a residential area with these houses. And so I think it's a great project to have. It's a great need. I just don't like the location myself. I would support the project. I just don't like the location myself.
Okay, anybody else? Are we ready to vote? I'll call the roll. Duxon?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
No.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, so that's 5-1. All right. Let's see, the next item is Southworks. Here it is. We have some guests with us today. You're certainly welcome to come to open chairs.
Just fill in? Or?
Yeah, I think that's probably the easiest.
Not enough. I can move.
We have to spread out a little bit.
I can move. Do you want to press? You want me to move? No.
There's one seat at the end there, or next to me.
Yeah, there's a couple over here.
Greg, you can sit down. As you can see, it takes a village to do a very large project.
Hey, I do have a few just comments I'd like to make generally. This is an exciting moment. I know that most people would say the IDA is one of the most boring public boards there is, but it really isn't. And here we are. This has been a long time coming. I really welcome that you're here today. And wanted to speak just very briefly to talk about our role here, that we are not a developer, obviously. We're not a planning board. You know, we're not the city or the town, and we should not be involved in the granular decisions about what gets built. Our really sole involvement is as a public investor, and crossing that line between government and private enterprise is necessarily sort of controversial and difficult. And we're going to have, I think, a fairly long conversation to get us there, but I'm very happy that we are finally having it. I do have some personal hopes for how we get there. I want to make sure that each one of the IDA members is very comfortable that they've gotten their questions answered, that they have been properly briefed, and that I'm hopeful that we have a unanimous vote. If we don't have unanimous, I certainly hope it's close. I would be quite disappointed if we're on a 4-3 split on a project of this size and importance to the community. We really should be looking to build consensus. And to get there, there's some proposals to get further updates on the financial and the community benefits. I hope that the agency the members will support doing that. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about the proposal in the application to have a working group. In concept, I think it's critically important that we get a lot of community input, but I'm disinclined to do it through a working group. I don't want a separate group of people going through and then making a recommendation to us. There's 7 people that are on the IDA that are going to have to make a real decision here, and I want throughout this process that we remember that and remember the gravity of it. So what I'm proposing that we proceed, and we'll get to this, is that we invite community input, a lot of community input, and from a lot of different directions. But to have people come sit at the table with us to try to make us smarter about the project and about development in general and about community needs, and do that for as much time as we need to make sure we're getting all the input we need, but never losing sight of the fact that this responsibility remains with us. So that's what I'm thinking, but I'd take input on how we proceed from there. Heather, do you have more you'd like to?
Thanks, Rich, for kicking us off. Just a couple of things to piggyback on what Rich said. You know, generally, when you receive an application, you'll be accepting it as complete, moving it on to a public hearing. I want to reiterate what Rich said. You're going to take as much time and as many meetings as you feel necessary before you may be ready to fully understand the application, the ask, have all of your questions answered. You may want additional information, so don't feel like our goal here today is accept the application, send it on to a public hearing. Our goal really here today is to reintroduce the project team. The team is going to, has prepared a presentation. Hopefully we'll answer some of your questions during that presentation. After the presentation, ask as many questions, have discussion about what additional information you might want, you know, come to some conclusion on that. Rich, if there's time, yes, address those recommendations that were in the community benefit memo about potential other kinds of information and how to address that public comment period. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the team. And just ask if maybe you could hold questions until they're done with their presentation. That way we'll be assured that at least we get, you know, that information on the table, if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe we could start with introductions.
I think we can. We actually have a slide for that, if we could bring up the presentation.
Yes. I need the permission. Yeah, I think I just gave it to you. Yeah. Oh, great. You're all set.
You'll be able to read the notes. It says I'm happy to be here.
Are you really? I am so glad.
That to remind us or you?
Keep everybody informed. But while we work this out, I will say that we are extremely happy to be here on a personal level. I'm very happy to be here. I first saw this project sitting on a different board, the City Planning Board for the City of Ithaca, as we were leading the GEIS process for this project. And that side of the table is very different than this one. You know, it's taken a lot of education, even as I've come on, to try to really understand how all the pieces of this really fit together to become actualizable. You know, the articles that came out when we were going through that process talked about this project as a secret garden or, you know, the sleeping giant. But it's not that. It's going to be a real neighborhood and a real space for the neighborhoods around it and the community that we have. So we've got a lot of faces to get, you know, with us today. We have a large and very capable ownership team with values that I think really reflect the needs of this project and the values of this community. Not everybody's going to get to be here every month, but we're going to lead off by sort of introducing the whole team and having them talk about themselves and this project and how it all fits together for Ithaca.
So I'm up first. Brian Murray, I'm the CEO of Shift Capital. We're the lead developer on this project. You're going to hear us talk about passion, excitement, collaboration. We are a mission-driven real estate group focused on building equitable neighborhoods. Couldn't be happier to be here. We'll talk a little bit more about how we got to be here in a bit, but I'm going to pass it along to Greg.
Yes, Greg DeFabio. I'm a partner at Shift Capital, and I run the construction. My role here would be to help assist Sarah and Rob in reference to whatever they need, whether it's estimating or anything else related to the construction process, and keep the process moving.
I'm Rob Lewis. I am the development project manager for this project. Some of you know who I am. I talked a little bit. I just couldn't be more excited to be here.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Barden. I'm the Community Outreach and Leasing Coordinator for the project. I know a lot of faces in the room and I'm really excited to be part of this. My grandfather's first job out of high school was at the Emerson plant, and my longtime partner, like the financial stability we had early on in our careers was because he worked at Borg Warner making the chain that was developed over at Emerson. So it's really special to have the opportunity to help bring it to life.
We're going, there we go.
Hi, I'm David Lubin. To give you a little history of myself, when I was in college and back in the 70s, I worked on environmental sciences as well as alternative energy, so I have a background in that. After school, I worked in the family business. It was a chain of retail stores, and in 1962, we opened a store here in Ithaca. We've been here, part of this community ever since. From there, ran the retail stores till into the 90s. But in the 80s, I started working on development and developing different properties. I worked with major retailers and regional retailers. I worked with Toys R Us, brought them in. I worked with a division of Wegmans, which was Chase Pitkin, and I've worked with a lot of smaller retailers. I also developed medical community, and in the late 90s, I developed a business park on the border of New York and Pennsylvania, where I brought in a dimensional lumber mill into an area, brought in the water, the sewer, the electric, built the water tank, roads, and there's just that dimensional lumber mill has about 650 people working at it now, and the business park has a few hundred other people working in that. I've developed hotels. I've owned, managed, and built them. I've recently built Herald Square, and of course, I've been working on the Emerson project since 2010.
All right, I think I'm up next. Hello, everyone. My name is Nena Lynch. I'm the founder and CEO of Xylem Projects, a mission-driven real estate development firm. And my career has been at the intersection of economic development and real estate development. And that includes several years as senior advisor to Mayor Bloomberg. So my specialty is our large-scale public-private partnerships, and I'm super happy to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Geska, and I'm the president of U.S. Ceiling Corp. And one of the development partners for this project. I'm excited to be here today. For the last 23 years, I've built my business in Rochester, New York, as a construction firm, and really from a social impact perspective, focusing on priority populations and giving them access to skilled trades training and quality paying jobs. I'm the past chair of the Rochester Builders Exchange, and I bring a workforce development aspect and a construction focus, as well as the social impact community focus. 2 years ago, I bought a home in Ithaca, so I'm also an Ithaca resident, and I'm proud to be a part of this community and to continue to know and get to know the community better.
So that's our team, and this is what we're asking for. You'll notice no numbers on this slide. We will get into the numbers towards the end. I just sort of want to talk a little bit about what it is and how it fits together. The first thing we're asking for is that we freeze the tax assessment for the site at its current value for the duration of pre-development and construction. Then we talk about a 20-year pilot for each sub-project as it enters into service, and then a mortgage recording tax abatement and a sales tax abatement. So the typical IDA package with the caveat that this is a bigger project, different terms. The big piece for us is the certainty and the stability and the ability to communicate a predictable path to financing sources that an IDA package of support represents. It's a challenging time to do anything. This is a challenging project and would be in the best of times. And so the IDA is an important part of making anything happen here. Yes, I mean, there's been references to big numbers, but within the magnitude of this project, we're talking less than 15% of total project costs, so not outside the realm of sanity. And part of that is that this project is so big. Now, I hear it talked about as if it's 100 acres, 1,000 units, and 2 million square feet. And all those numbers are about right, but ever so slightly large. It's 95 acres. Of those 95 acres, about 32 you can actually build on and do something with. That means you got 63 that are going to remain pretty much in their natural state, which is a huge boon to this community, not only for the preservation of the land, but the activation of that land. There's going to be a trail network, there's going to be recreation, it's going to be a real amenity. In terms of what's actually getting built, you have an adaptive reuse of 820,000 square feet of industrial buildings that right now sit vacant. Sarah and I have our office there, but there's not a whole lot else going on. And then around that core of commercial space that holds the neighborhood together, and in that core too, 915 residential units that hit all income levels. The idea is to have a real neighborhood with a real mix of incomes and a real mix of uses that knits it together and makes it really work as part of this community.
History. Back to me. So as everyone refers to the site as the former Emerson site, it is really the former Morris Chain site. Morris Chain started in Trumansburg in the late 1800s, making springs for buggies, and then started to transition into chains. They had a cousin in Chicago who was building bicycles, and they started developing a chain for the bicycles. From there, the chain business grew and developed into all kinds of different avenues. They also diversified into many different products. They built typewriters, they built adding machines. Of course, they built the Tommy, the World War I training plane. And as they developed, they, in the 20s, they had, I think, quadrupled the size of the original plant. And they had 1,700 workers working up there when the population of Ithaca was 17,000. So it was a major employer then. It was also, in the 20s, the largest manufacturer of chain in the whole country, and they had a significant part of that business. In the late 20s, they merged with Borg-Warner, and from there, Borg-Warner developed them into a national company with many branches in Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and I believe Kentucky. From there, in the 80s, it went to a multinational company, but in 82, Emerson came and bought the division, the power transmission division. They started developing the plant after 82, and they continued to grow the company with their corporate headquarters for all this division located here in Ithaca. In fact, I just ran into Gene Uruzzi, who was the president at the time, before he retired. In 2011, they sold that division, and as Gene just happened to mention to me, the people who bought it had bought all kinds of that whole division and are very strong, and Emerson decided to exit that business.
If I may, there's a larger point about the history, which is that we embrace it. We think it's clearly important to Ithaca, and we plan in our development to highlight it and celebrate it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, am I up again? Oh, approvals. So I first toured the site in 2010, and when it first went up for sale. I was intrigued by the site, and in 2011 I started working with Emerson to develop an LOI, a letter of intent. We were able to, I'm sorry, you know, it was a interesting site in that most factories are located along a river so that they could get their power from the river and get rid of their waste on the river. But the Emerson site was very interesting. It's on a hillside, has beautiful views, and it's really a unique property. I developed a purchase sales agreement with Emerson in 2013, and from there we worked to bring in my own consultants, my own environmental engineers and attorneys, and I worked with the city, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and the Department of Health to develop a draft GEIS. We finally developed a scope for that, and in 2016, the city, as the lead agency, approved the GEIS. They also approved received seeker approval, as well as PUD approval and PDC designation from both the town and the city. We worked with Emerson to clean the site up to residential standards. Originally, the ROD amendment, the record of decision, was that it would be cleaned up to industrial standards. That didn't work for what I had envisioned for the area, and I really said we need to clean it up to residential so that people are satisfied and comfortable with that. And so we wanted to amend the record of decision. And we, Emerson continued to do mitigation and clean up the area. And in 2019, we went back to DEC and DOH to try to get this amendment. Well, they started considering it, and then, of course, in 2020, they got diverted by COVID. And so everything sort of stopped until finally in October 2022, they approved the ROD amendment, and Schiff and I closed on the property in December of 2022.
So I'm going to switch gears and just talk a little bit about vision here, but I just want to take a moment to reflect on, and he doesn't know that I'm doing this, but what a important bulwark David Lubin is for the preservation of this site. We're going to talk a lot about collaboration. It takes a village. I think Heather stole that line. But if it wasn't, David had a lot of choices with this site, and he was steadfast in wanting to make this something very special for the Ithaca community, and I don't think we'd be here without that ideal, which, I don't think a lot of developers get credit for, but, I think a lot of people wanted to come in and tear everything down. So we're going to talk about history, as Nena said before. Quickly, this might be, some folks might have heard this, but I just want to talk about why we're here and how we got here. We are a Philadelphia-based, mission-driven group. We do focus on neighborhoods. We don't like to consider ourselves just about office or multifamily or affordable. We really like to think of ourselves as a holistic developer, and that is driven by this place-based, people-focused, and purpose approach. But we wouldn't be here if the IAED did not cold email us. And I don't think I've ever responded to a cold email, but it was a damn good one. And I found it fascinating on the surface, just the same way that David did as well. This is a special site. We do a lot of work around the country, and couldn't be more excited about that piece. When we got the call and we called back, we knew right away that we needed to build the right team. This is a big site, and while we've done over $250, $300 million of projects across the country, this one was going to need something extra special. So I'd been working in Rochester with Melissa on a project called Bull's Head there that shares a lot of similar values. I called her up. She said, I'll meet you in Ithaca tomorrow. We came in, we met David, and really hit it off from a vision perspective. From there, I knew we were still missing a little bit of that public-private connection, and that's, I've known Nena for many years, and as she shared, that ability to think strategically about how to get projects like this done was, key to bringing her into the project as well. As a whole, we are focused on mixed income, mixed uses, and we really do believe that that approach is the difference maker to making successful projects. It's hard in an individual building. Our funding streams nationally and LIHTC and everything are not set up to do that, but on a site this size and scale, we are hoping to take a different approach. We're going to open up, I guess, to the site real quick, and I'm going to talk through and share kind of where these commercial and housing strategies fit together. Rob mentioned the larger picture. I'm just going to touch on a couple areas here. We have 450 units approved for the Woods section, which will be largely a residential area. That we'll go in more detail. We have the Gateway section, which includes about 100 units, plus some commercial spaces, plus a trailhead and public space that will start that rail connection that we've talked about before. We have the Hills section, which will be about 200 units. And then really the heart of Southworks is going to be the Chainway, which is 800,000 square feet of adaptive reuse in what we hope to be a mix of industrial, commercial, as well as residential. I just want to articulate for, I think it was Teresa who shared up front, our goal is to exceed the affordability minimums here. But we want to do it in a coherent and a multi-tiered way so that there's access and across all the commercial. We also want to approach this is super unique, but a lot of times when we think about construction and workforce, typically on these projects, by the time you're talking to community about workforce and creating access and opportunities, the project's already I don't want to say done, but it's almost too late. We are going to lead, and our plan is to lead with a workforce and a strategy first, which is going to be an open door for accessibility for jobs on this site. We are going to lead with affordability first. There will be market here. We are planning to hit the middle income, which we're going to talk about as well, but it really is going to be a holistic and intentional approach from the beginning. I'm going to mix a few things. So again, just largely, this is 915 housing units, 800,000 square feet of commercial and industrial. I want to hit a little bit on kind of adaptive reuse and why this is important. So we've done a lot of adaptive reuse, and adaptive reuse allows you to really create different opportunities for affordable commercial accessibility. And while, I think Jen was talking about this earlier, there's a cool factor to mixing old and new, which I think design aesthetically is certainly something we are going to hit. This is also about creating spaces for the small enterprises, the makers, the light manufacturers, the small businesses, entrepreneurs. This is something that we've done in other places, and it really is a jobs-first approach. If we had, and David had decided to knock down everything, it would be very difficult to create commercial spaces here that were truly affordable across the spectrum. Our goal is to create a good mix of commercial spaces that hit a lot of different price points and a lot of different access points for different, for larger groups, and for smaller groups. And so we're really excited about the adaptive reuse from the perspective that, it's a nod to history. It's an open door on the commercial side that allows us to bring in others. I think I'm going to pass it off to the next slide at this point.
Infrastructure. So hitting on Brian's point, what are the positives of developing a adaptive reuse is you've got these great buildings. One of the negatives of that is you sort of have a lot of stuff in place that may not be in the right place. We have, the Emerson site is fairly unique in that the infrastructure is private. The water lines are private, the sewer lines are private, the electric, there's 2 substations there, and everything is way beyond its useful life. We've had some water breaks up there. The pipes are from 1907 to 1920, and we've had some challenges. Those are all going to have to be replaced. As I said, there's 2 substations that are old and antiquated, and to replace those will be in the millions and millions of dollars. But it does give us opportunity to recreate everything. We're looking at microgrids for the area that will help develop that area. We're looking at possibly generating our own power through green hydrogen. We're looking at solar collection. We're looking at geothermal, and as well as battery storage. There's a lot of old, inefficient equipment, but we think we can reactivate that. Just one example is we've repaired our sprinkler systems and the fire alarm systems and stuff, and we have a number of fire hydrants that are, again, all private, have to be tested and everything. And we've brought everything up to standards. One exception is that the sprinkler heads are over 50 years old. So it seems like they're better to be replaced than start testing them. And there are 6,000 sprinkler heads. So it's just to give you an idea of the complexity of this project. Not only do we have to take care of the old infrastructure, but as was pointed out, we're going to develop other areas. We're going to have to develop the roads. We're going to have to develop traffic lights. We're going to have lighting on those roads. We've got to build sidewalks. And one of the major electrical distribution and stormwater management. stormwater management is in itself a large complication because we're on this hillside. And not only do we have to store our impervious water, but there's a lot of water from all the development above us that seems to come our way. Water, of course, runs downhill. But we have a lot of challenges. There's a lot of expense there, and it's one of the reasons we're here asking for your help. Thank you. Oh, environmental. Well, so the environmental pursuit has been a long and arduous story. As I already mentioned, Emerson purchased the property in 1982. In 1987, they realized that there was some groundwater pollution from TCE. TCE is a grease cutter that was used to clean the parts before they were ready to be shipped. Well, Emerson never used TCE, but it was present from the Borg-Warner days. When they continued to investigate the situation, they found that Borg-Warner was aware that they had this environmental issue, but they didn't disclose it. So Emerson ended up suing them, and Borg-Warner had to pay the first $20 million of the environmental remediation. But of course, we've gone past that number, and we've done. We've subdivided the property. There's about an acre that Emerson will retain because that's the source underneath that property of the TCE plume in the groundwater. This has all been, they have a dual extraction system that rids the ground of this TCE, and they've been working on that for many years, and they continue to work on that. They are monitoring the plume to see where it's moving, and fortunately, with their processes, it hasn't moved. So it's not growing, it's not affecting anything outside the area, but when I made the arrangement with Emerson, the agreement was that I would be able to do my own search of the property because obviously I would be responsible for it. So the agreement was that anything that I found that had any pollution or contamination before I closed, Emerson is responsible for. So of course, I did a very thorough investigation because obviously I wanted to be responsible for as little as possible in this particular case, seeing that I hadn't started it. So we examined different areas down to, a billion parts per billion. We drilled, Emerson drilled hundreds of wells, and we drilled hundreds more. There were over 300 wells. There were test pits. We geoprobed the area, looking everywhere we could for any, not only any contamination, but if there was a source, because certainly ground can be polluted from one thing or another, but is there a source where it's coming from? So we worked very hard to find that investigation, and I've been told that this is the most investigated site ever done in New York State. So we haven't found any, we found some local areas of concern, but no big environmental issues. And so, I'm sorry, lost my train of thought. Instead of, so the big thing was, instead of bringing it to industrial standards, I brought it up with the help of Emerson. We brought it up to residential standards. Felt that being up to a residential standard was going to give peace of mind, not only to anybody who lived there, but to the DOH and DEC. We have a site management plan in place with the state that states anything we do to disturb the ground can't be done without a third-party person being involved and watching to make sure we don't come upon any environmental issues. Also, if we tear any buildings down, that all has to be examined. We are responsible for the lead paint that might be in the building and the asbestos that's in the building. That does fall on us, but any ground contamination that we were able to find is being covered by Emerson, and it continues to be involved. They're coming, I believe, their consultants are coming next week to do some studies of the basements of certain buildings and looking to develop a air intrusion devices to vent and make sure that there's no contamination or vapors that get into the buildings, so that they'll all be safe. And you know, if there are areas of concern throughout the site, and if we were ever to disturb any of those, the DEC and DOH will be totally involved with that, again, with third-party consultants.
Great. Okay, so I'm up next. And I do think David touched on it, but I think it's worth emphasizing that notwithstanding all the work that's been done, there's still a lot to do within the buildings, the PCBs, the lead, the asbestos. So that is another burden on the project. So I get to talk about sustainability. It was one of the things that really bonded our team, you know, with our mission approach. We all knew we wanted to lean into sustainability, and it was actually, after we closed on the property, one of the first things that we really set out to tackle and think about. And given the size and scale of the property, we knew it was important to think big picture. This is not the type of property where you want to go building by building, you know, slapping on solar panels and doing whatever. I mean, actually, it's really, and what you'll hear us talk about is that this is really, our approach to sustainability is where we think about it in terms of the infrastructure for the site. So we brought on Burrow Happold, which is an international firm, consultant, and to help us think through and organize our thoughts. And in your packet, you actually had a much more extensive set of material with details on our goals, our targets, strategy, and KPIs, and we're happy to get into that. But for today, what we really wanted to emphasize is, A, that sustainability is top of mind for us, and that we're taking a really comprehensive approach. There are 4 main prongs. You see 5 on the slide, and I will touch on that. But the 4 primary prongs are really centered around energy, which is typically what you hear when you think about sustainability, but also water. We know that increasingly water conservation is an issue, waste, and then mobility. And I'll just touch on each of those briefly. So energy, our goal is to be net zero or net zero ready, but really looking to be net zero positive. David touched on all of the sustainable features that we're looking at for renewable energy, from geothermal to solar, and our hope is to get to net zero positive, but it's still early days, but that is our aspiration. Water. We are looking to minimize water consumption and maximize gray water usage in our plans. And then we also, as far as waste goes, we want to maximize or diversion from landfill. And then mobility. This is a fun and interesting one, and I think it really speaks to why we need to really think about this site from a very holistic, big picture perspective. Our goal is to maximize non-vehicular use throughout the site. And you can only do that by thinking about early on about how all the paths are going to connect, how those paths are built and designed to promote other uses such as walking and biking, et cetera. But it's not just about our site. It's really about connecting to the surrounding neighborhoods. If we do this well, residents on South Hill will use this as a pleasant, site to walk through. Students and faculty at Ithaca College will use this site to walk down to the downtown. So the whole idea in thinking about accessibility, walkability is both for the site, but also for the surrounding neighborhood. And then finally on here, you might not typically see at the bottom, you see local economy and community. And what that really is pointing to is that our approach here is really thinking about sustainability in a broader sense. So, Brian touched on our hope and our vision for the types of businesses that we want to attract here, but we also realize that we're fitting into an existing ecosystem. And our desire and our hope and our plan is really to complement what is there and build on what is already here in Ithaca, which is great and really fantastic. But it's not your typical lens through which you think about sustainability, but in order for this project to be successful and it to lead to the greater good, we think of it in sustainability terms. So housing. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this slide. I think everybody who lives in Ithaca knows about the issues, which there really is a dire shortage, and it's really across the affordability, so from market rate all the way down to affordability. So it's all, and from rental to home ownership. And we have had conversations with a number of different local community members as well as institutions, and a couple anecdotes I want to share that have stood out. So we heard from one local employer that they discovered one of their staff members was living in a car. And so this is somebody who was employed, and that was the most viable option for them. We've also heard stories about folks who commute from 90 minutes away for jobs here. So clearly, we know both from the anecdotes as well as the data that there is a real housing shortage here. And I want to thank the Chamber for their recent report on the state of housing as well. So what is our approach? Brian touched on it, but our approach really is to address the full spectrum of need. So from rental housing to home ownership and across the affordability spectrum. So we have come up with this concept or this starting point of doing 40% market rate, and then the balance being some combination of affordable and workforce, and doing both rental and for sale. And I'm happy to report, I know that we're in early discussions with two groups, Beacon Communities that has done some work in the area, as well as INHS. In fact, just this morning we had a planning meeting, and we've also had some detailed discussions with HCR, the State Housing Finance Agency, and we do a plan to apply for their next funding round, which hasn't been released yet, but we expect it to be released next month for submission in September, and we are going full steam ahead at that to get going on the housing, and that'll include both if everything works out, both rental and for sale. So we're really excited about this, and we think our approach not only addresses, first and foremost, it addresses the needs of Ithaca and the Ithaca community, but we also think it helps create the type of diverse and robust community that we'd like to see at Southworks.
So both David and Nena touched on the significance of this site historically, and in our intention as a team, I think we coalesced around carrying the mantle of responsibility that inheriting and owning this site means for the community. So to recognize that at one time 10% of Ithaca's population worked on this site, and ways that we can, bear the continuity and preservation of that value moving forward is significantly important to us. And I want you to know that programmatically and from every design consideration, we're looking at that as a value construct. And so really, how do we honor the history? And the main theme that comes through is innovation. And so one of the ways we can pay homage to the past is really looking at ways that we can carry the innovation forward. And that's what we're most excited about for this site. When it comes to workforce development, one of the first things, as I mentioned, in 23 years of building workforce development programs that have been successful and partnering with other groups that do the same in Rochester, I really wanted to get to know the local workforce needs and the programming. And I was really struck and impressed by the amazing number of workforce development initiatives that are in this community, whether it's TST-BOCES, TC3, and many others. There's countless numbers of great programming. So the good news is we're not here to reinvent a wheel. What we're here to do is recognize in all of those programs, there is a critical need for physical space. One of the things we heard was that TST-BOCES, their construction training program had been defunct for 7 years because of lack of physical space. We happen to have a lot of space. But more importantly, we have a heart for collaboration and being additive to this community. And one of the things that we also recognized is there is a critical shortage of construction employers that are in Ithaca in this community. And so as a business that's been looking at from the outside in, I've always recognized in my business the value of the amount of work that's here in Ithaca, but I could never solve the local labor issue. If I bring my workers from Rochester, I have to, I'm losing a lot of efficiency, I'm adding a lot of cost to the project, and it becomes a burden to the project. And so really my focus in order to be a solution and a collaborative partner in this community is how do we bring more construction employers that are local to this community. And so I partnered, I've brought in as one of our anchor tenants, Livingston Associates. Livingston Associates has over 20-year history on the subject of workforce development and providing fractional support to the more than 150 construction clients that they serve. And part of that is job recruitment and job placement. And annually, Livingston places 500 people in construction jobs in Rochester. Livingston wants to be an anchor tenant to support this community in the Southworks project, and they will be one of our catalytic first projects. And the model for one of the buildings, Building 21 by reference, is that it would be an employer and training embedded model, meaning that we are going to have construction firms both from Ithaca and from outside of Ithaca expand their operations to become Ithaca, to have Ithaca as part of their operations, so to relocate their business and expand their business in this market. I've done that myself. I'm working on the House of Alpha project for the Alpha Light Fund, which is the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity home. And I'm hiring local labor, and I'm partnering with the Carpenter Local 277. Brian left, but the Carpenters are working on our project. It's a great collaboration and greatly successful. And we want to expand that. So can we have a model where we have many different skilled trades sharing space along with training programs? The employers will get to interact directly with the training cohorts. The training cohorts, the good news is we don't have a lot of the barriers that you experience on workforce development, which is lack of transportation. We are going to have an immense amount of construction on this project site for the foreseeable future. And so the ability for individuals to come in at an entry level, be in an environment, whether it's collaborating through groups like TC3 or others, but coming into the site, being able to witness firsthand through paid internships all various aspects of construction so that they're immersed in it and they get to know what their interests are. And then to further explore those relationships directly with employers who will be working on site and be able to continue to cultivate and grow their skill sets accordingly, providing good quality paying jobs and good quality paying benefits. And ideally in this ecosystem, again, we are being supportive to the great work that's already being done in the community. Also on the subject of innovation is recognizing that we want to focus on innovation and acceleration. So We recognize there's a tremendous talent drain, and we need to keep talent in Ithaca. So if it's, incubators or companies coming out of Cornell or Ithaca College, how do we retain those businesses in this community? Lack of physical space was a huge barrier that caused people to leave this market. We can solve that problem. But we can also create a vibrancy and community and shared entrepreneurship within this site, being catalytic and collaboration. And what we've adopted is the language on the front of house, back of house model. So we're going to create an environment that supports entrepreneurs to be on site, and with our workforce development and programming and initiatives, can we provide supports to those businesses to solve some of the critical issues that face their businesses, which is the lack of skilled talent. We think that we can be an economic development boost through these workforce development collaborations. And again, the concept is we are going to have the employer solution to be able to get people the jobs that they critically need.
We've already heard Nina talk a little bit about the transportation aspects of sustainability. But I know that some people here have done that walk down South Hill to the downtown. Maybe even some have done it in a scholastic sense late at night. And that is not the safest walk in the world. And there's a real opportunity to improve on that. And yes, we're going to improve on that with the miles of road we build and the miles of trails we build and sidewalks. But we're also going to improve on it with the nuts and bolts, getting our bike parking right, working with our transit resources, making sure that we have bike share and car share as part of our long-term planning on making this site as accessible as possible. But then there's also just, we're going to make this a place worth being. We're going to have 63 acres of open space that we activate and make worth walking through and make it possible to walk through. All of which is key to our vision of how this site turns into a neighborhood and how this site links not only with the different parts of itself, but with the community. The idea is to have it integrated into Ithaca, into the county and the community, so it's accessible for the people already living here. The idea is to grow the pie, make it complementary with the resources around it, and synergistic with what's already happening. And we think we can do that with a cohesive strategy that supports Ithaca and really integrates this neighborhood into a broader one. Which brings us to benefits. So I do want to say, first off, that most of the numbers on this slide are driven from a study that you have that was done in 2022. And that study said that we were going to build this project for $375 million. And we can say tonight that we are not going to build this project for $375 million. Right now we're looking at a budget of 580 something, and this project is going to take some time to do, and construction costs are not likely to go down. But with the numbers that we have from that, we do know that the impact of this project to the local economy is profound. We know that during the construction period, we're looking at 500 million plus of direct and induced spending. We know we're looking at just shy of 5,000 jobs for the construction piece. And that's really exciting, but it really just reflects the size. I think what's really interesting is the recurring annual impact, because that reflects the project's character. 2,000 plus jobs in this county spurred by this project that stay, that are here forever. That is the exciting piece. The $700 million in impact that happens each year once we get this up and running. That's the impactful piece. And then, of course, there's the increase in tax revenue. Yes, we're going to talk through this ask just in a minute here, but in the context of that ask, there's $44 million plus of real tax dollars created by this project flowing through our tax jurisdictions, assuming you help us get off the ground and get going.
All right, so the moment we've all been waiting for, we're actually getting into some details. The request is built around the size, scale, and challenge of this project. The most important thing that we're asking for off the bat is a freeze on current taxes. And although that's for 15 years, I just want to emphasize, look at this like a runway. There are going to be projects that happen maybe the end of this year, next year, year after that, that are all then going to, at that point, enter into the 20-year pilot that we're requesting. There's some numbers in here. I'm not gonna read them. I just want to emphasize the mechanics of how this works. We're going to walk through a couple examples, and that, as Rob said, this represents only about 11% of the total project costs. There's some step downs in here. You can see what the current assessment is, what the current annual taxes are, and then at full scale, what those taxes look like over time. So next slide. So I think we're missing our color block. There they are. All right. What I want to do as I walk into these examples is actually talk in real time. So we are out actively chatting with the community, looking at needs of the community, talking to potential tenants. The color blocks here represent areas of the site, the existing adaptive reuse site that we have interest in and we're actively having conversations on. This is happening in real time. This is not theoretical, this is real. I just want to take a moment to highlight the great work of Sarah, who's been a new member of the team. And Sarah has really been driving this, not just in a traditional, hey, I'm a real estate broker, but hey, I'm here, I'm local. Every day she's talking to community members. Every day she's talking to nonprofits and groups and looking for ways in which this site can be an asset for the community. And along with Rob, we are just absolutely excited for what she's been able to do in such a short amount of time. And I'm really excited for what that means over the next few years. Also, just from a mission standpoint, that personal and professional commitment to DEI is, a big part of who she is and what she's bringing to the table as well. So with that being said, we're going to dive into actual examples here. Building 21 is the building that Melissa was referring to as a workforce center. This is one that we do have active LOIs that we are negotiating right now. We are working to bring to close, and will probably be one of the first projects that we bring online, which again, in that open opportunity door that we want to start from the beginning, our intention is to get this done as quickly as possible. I will say, that we are in a very strange marketplace. So it is a complex world to get a lot of things financed right now, but this one is one that we feel like we can get off the ground in the next 6 to 12 months. So this is one, as an example, that would be into the freeze category with a start date of mid-2025. That would run into that 20-year pilot, which would end in 2045. So in total, from today, we're talking about 21 years. So I'm going to give one more other industrial example on the next slide. So this is building 34, which is the largest building on site, one of the more recent buildings, if not the most recent building built on the site. We have a lot of interest in this site from multiple tenants. This will probably end up becoming a multi-tenant building. But our hope, for example, and this is just an example, and we do have some of the uses, in addition to kind of reusing it as a warehouse space, a freight shipment, the construction material supplier that we're talking to as well. But let's say this takes 2 years. I think this might happen sooner, but let's say it takes 2 years. So again, the example is we're in that freeze period. We we complete construction and we bring it online and into service in mid-2026, where the 20-year pilot will start. So now in this case, this is going out to 2046. We'll keep going. The other component of the site I want to touch on is the wood section. We also, like I was talking about on the commercial side, we have a lot of traction here. Nena got into that a little bit. We have an incredible relationship that we're building with HCR. There's a lot of interest in making this site happen, and kind of the mission that we are bringing to the table with that spectrum of affordability. We've mentioned that we are absolutely seeking the best possible partners to bring this to light. Housing will, if it's affordable housing, we will be submitting a pilot for the housing separately from what we're asking today. That's, Rob.
That's about it.
Bring us home.
Yeah, so yes, big ask, big project, and a really important project, I think, for all of the communities that we represent here and are part of. You know, the $44 million in tax revenue is itself a big number and important to our communities. But the thing that I'm most excited about are the values that this team is bringing to this site. There's a lot of ways to do a giant project, and there's a lot of ways to get it wrong. And we have here a team that is extremely committed to getting it right. Yes, the priorities of the project, I think, reflect the priorities of this team, but I think also very deeply connect to the priorities of our shared community. This project has a real chance to meet a lot of Ithaca's needs. So this is what we'd like to see happen. We're hoping that we can collectively take the summer to review, make sure that you have all the information you need to make, you know, the right decision, the best decision, that we can have a public hearing in the early fall and aim at an early fall vote. That is, of course, our desired timeline, and we'll get to learn about your desired timelines here shortly, I have no doubt. But this has just been an introduction. We realize that we're at the beginning of this process. We're excited to work with you through this process. And we, of course, very much welcome your questions.
Okay, well, that was just great. I note it's 3:50, and we typically go till 4 o'clock. I'd like to get a sense from the members what you'd like to do. I think there's a lot of different directions we could go in talking about this. We could just jump into questions. We could talk a little bit about what we think our process should be. I know we've got some decisions to make on getting some studies done. We could talk about that, but Jeff.
Yeah, so I would agree with you, Rich. I think it's important for us to kick those studies off at this, so we vote on these studies at this meeting, so those studies can get done as soon as possible. So my preference would be to put those on the table to see if we can commission the financial reasonability review and any economic impact analysis as well.
You want to do that as a motion?
Yes.
All right. And seconds? Okay, discussion. John.
I think there's a lot here to digest, and I guess I wonder about, I could see voting for pushing these studies forward today. However, in my mind, I think there's a little bit of work necessary to develop a sense of what the questions we really need answered are in order to make a good decision here. And I don't know if we want to start a study when our question is perhaps not entirely formed.
The financial analysis was coming out with a construction cost that's quite a bit different than what we're looking at today. And it seems pretty obvious we need somebody to at least go through and sort of rationalize those numbers to current construction cost. Would you feel comfortable going forward on that one? So why don't we break them up? And
I mean, to be honest, I'm comfortable going forward with both of them, but in my mind, I think that we might actually also come back and say there are other questions we need answered. And I'm a little bit worried that we're going to say, okay, do these 2 studies, the team is going to pay for it, right? And then, and then we're going to be like, oh, what about these other 4 studies? And what about these 6 other questions as we go? And I feel a little bit like, a sense of like wanting to, I guess, just make sure that everybody's on that page page here that like this isn't all the questions we need to answer, and we're probably going to need some amount of professional consulting and guidance or sort of knowledge that doesn't necessarily exist around this table. I mean, that's part of where we're going with the concept of developing, whether it's a working group or a group of advisors or consultants to help us think about this thing overall.
Well, let's talk about the working group bigger idea in a moment. Heather.
So I wonder if maybe you start with piece by piece. If you look at the reasonability assessment, I mean, that's going to look at their pro formas, their financials, make sure that those assumptions are accurate, look at the internal rate of return. All of those pro formas are things they've already submitted to me. Those things are already done. So, doing that reasonability analysis, maybe you might feel comfortable saying, yep, that's pretty standard. We can look at doing that. And as one. Number two, the economic impact analysis is really going to look at their full build out from their pro formas, their assumptions, what the economic impacts would be. So those are two things maybe you want to start with, and as you develop more questions, you might want to have some other conversations about how those questions might be answered.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that myself. I think that we may have other things that we're going to have to delve into, but we know we need this. I'm comfortable voting on this now, but I open the floor to anybody else who sounds like we're ready to vote to update the two studies. And Heather, can you just indicate you have some providers, some consultants?
Camoin Associates is an economic development and planning firm that is based out of Saratoga. They do reasonability analyses for many IDAs. They have that background. I have an example of one here if anyone sort of wants to see what it looks like. I think that the way that they present the information is very understandable to a lay person, but is, I think, very comprehensive. Camoin, if you had them do the reasonability analysis, you could certainly have them tack on the economic impact analysis. They do these for many communities across the country. They would have a little bit more familiarity with the pro formas and the project, having done it for the reasonability analysis. So I'm thinking it might make sense to have them do both, but there are certainly other companies that could do an economic impact analysis as well.
And to be clear on this, we are the client, but the applicant is paying for the costs associated with these
Yes,
studies,
and they've
right?
signed in their certifications that, if the IDA decides that you want additional studies, that would be at a cost to them.
Okay. Duxon.
I think we should do this, but I have a dumb question. So the timeline for this project is pretty long, at least 15 years. Do you have a sense of how useful these studies are across that timescale? The past 20 years, we've seen at least two, literally earth-shattering events that changed the global economy. So it just seems like a difficult thing to work through and predict over that timescale.
Yes, in a community where we always want 110% and we want certainty, there are uncertainties. What I can say is that all these kinds of studies, they use models. So there's some variability within the models, but at the end of the day, I think you're getting a pretty good estimate that's based on a model that has been tried and true. Yes, COVID too could hit tomorrow and that will throw everything out the window. But for the most part, I would say it's going to be a fairly reasonable assessment of the project and its ability to move forward and what those impacts could be.
Yeah.
I'm sort of thinking about, this project really in my mind feels like it's not a project, it's a series of projects, and the, scenarios that you were outlining, I think that was very helpful. Will this study data have any kind of sensitivity to the sort of, those first steps? I mean, I don't know if those were, $100 a square foot renovations or, $3 million worth of roads just to get there, on these first couple of bites. And I think having some understanding of that and how that relates to the pilot structure feels important. And I don't know if this study, right, if we're going to be looking at the pro forma analysis with that granularity baked in, or if it's sort of more all in, think of it all at once at the end, kind of a.
The application is really for the full build out that's allowed under the GEIS. So the plan is to hit that. My assumption would be, in talking to the consultant, using that as the base, them having conversations with the team to best understand how that might be phased and the timing, so that they can, look at the time frames and how that impacts some of those benefits as well. That's the best answer that I would have today. I think, you did hear from the team that, what they're really looking for at the IDA in some respects is some certainty as they move forward, because so many of the pieces are so integral to seeing the whole vision happen. So while, yes, they are going to happen in sort of pieces and phases, it's really part of the bigger project per se. So I don't know how we sort of keep that in mind as we think through a 15-year, very large project.
Yeah, I think that's too big an issue for the moment. I think we need to get to a vote on what we have before us on the table. Are we comfortable in voting? Okay, Duxon.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Ann.
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we'll proceed with those studies. Again, it's 4 o'clock, so we're really at our typical ending point. I'd like to take a few more minutes with everybody's indulgence. What I would like to do is have us think a little bit about structure. I thought we might be able to get to that discussion today, but we're out of time really for it. But I might take a liberty and invite some people to come and talk to us about this project, start getting some community input, even though we haven't figured out exactly how we're going to do that, but I'd like us to begin. And we will then supplement that. So I would ask for the IDA members and staff and the development team, if you have ideas about who really should be here getting some time at the table to talk to us about this project and making us smarter for our decision making, let me know, and we'll do that on a running basis. But I'll take a first pass for some people to come speak with us in July with permission of the members. John.
I think that's a great idea. I, thinking about the time frame that was suggested on Rob's last slide there, we're talking about having maybe 4 total hours of meeting time during that period that I would call summer, and then another 2 hours of meeting time during that period that I would call fall. If we just keep to our regular monthly meetings is the only time
we may need special meeting.
I think we absolutely will need some special meetings.
Let's have further discussion about how we do that at our July meeting. So, okay, Ann.
Yes, can we schedule time at the July meeting, depending on what's on the schedule, just to follow up while this is fairly fresh, in our minds, because, the questions we have just regarding the presentation, we could have a lot of questions, but just on some of the stuff to help us digest what was presented and the packet of materials.
And is that PowerPoint, will that be made available to the members?
We will share that.
Thank you. Okay. Wow.
And I wanted to, if I could, just thank you for the presentation and for all your positive energy and looking at, especially with the sustainable aspects, and inclusivity, which is very near and dear to most of our hearts and what we've been trying to do in this community. So you see us, and we appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to say we didn't mean to go up to time, so there was no Q&A. As we said off the bat, this is something that will take the time and continue to take the time, and just really appreciate the opportunity to. We felt like it was a big story to tell, and there's a lot of pieces that we wanted to make sure that got across that represent us and what we're trying to do here. So thank you for that extra time.
Yeah, and the discussion will continue. Duxon.
I just, so I'm sold on the project. And so I really think, to your point earlier, Rich, that our focus will be on how the incentive is structured, the requested incentive is structured, which has a lot of variability in it because, we have multiple components. There's a construction timeline that might shift, which will then affect the timeline of the incentives. It's complicated. There are, as if you've been paying attention, there's been, well, even before the current news cycle, there's been a lot of focus on the appropriateness of abatements. And so, it is important that we bring people from various parts of the team to talk about this over the next few months. But, my focus will be on dissecting the financials and how the proposed abatement scheme applies.
Absolutely, yeah. My sense of the agency is that there's nobody sitting here saying they don't want to see this happen. It's just how we get there. So a lot of talk on that. Heather.
And I just wonder if it would be helpful for all of you to just jot down your questions and maybe share them with Rich and I. We can share them with the applicant to help them for the next meeting. And I know for me, when it's fresh in my mind, it's easier for me to remember what my questions are. So maybe over the next couple of days, if you have a little bit of time, just sort of let us know some of the questions that might have bubbled up for you.
That's a good idea, and the dialogue will continue. So good. Okay. Let's see, moving on through our agenda, I'd like to just make sure we get through it. Chair's report, I do have one item I just wanted to talk about a little bit and get a sense from the members. There was a news article about public hearings, and it was a rather complicated discussion, and I don't want to get into it in any great detail because ultimately New York State hasn't given us clear guidance, and the news article arose because we approved a project amendment having already had a public hearing, which legally appears to fulfill all of the legal requirements, but this news article was saying we should have done more. I'll agree with the author that I think we probably should consider a change to our policy, that if we're doing an amendment, we probably have to have another public hearing if there's significant change in the dollars. Even if the project doesn't change, even if as in this instance, we'd really committed to do the project in any event, but I want to stress just how many different ways we go to get public input. I try to attend all the public hearings. There are some people, and I'll commend Teresa Alt, comes to our public hearings pretty regularly and comments. Not very many other people do. We don't get good attendance at our public hearings. Certainly the press does not come to our public hearings. And so I don't know if that's the most valuable way. We have people that come to our regular meetings and talk to us face to face. We take written comments. We're all hiding in plain sight. I certainly talked to somebody on the street today about the meeting today. And I do that regularly. I'm confident that we work to be as transparent as we need to be, but I would suggest that going forward we change our policy to say if we're doing an amendment and it's more than 100,000, even though New York State law is not clear on this point, we probably should hold a public hearing. I assume that's agreeable to everybody. Okay, that's my chair's report.
Do we want to just vote on that?
We can vote on it, or we can just adopt, just go forward on that basis.
Can I ask a question on that? So, Heather, what do you see, or Russ, I'll ask you the question. What do you see with other IDAs? How do they handle that?
Can you use your mic? Russ?
Is it on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It varies. It varies. Most of the IDAs that I work with personally have the same approach as this board. I agree with Rich. It's probably not a bad idea just to keep our transparency as the levels as high as possible. And frankly, you know, it doesn't happen very often where there's that much of a change in a project where every month we're going to be coming back to have another public hearing. So I think it's a good idea, and if you want to vote on it, certainly that's not a bad idea either.
Heather?
So some IDAs do in their uniform tax exemption policy, which is, you know, your sort of guiding document, have in their process or procedures section, they do have language that they will hold a public hearing for any amendment over a certain dollar amount. And so some IDAs do, as a matter of course, always do another public hearing. Again, not required in law, but it would be in their UTEP. If the IDA wants to amend their UTEP, you do need to circulate it to taxing jurisdictions. So you wouldn't want to just pass it today without probably taxing jurisdiction notification. But I think in terms of passing a policy, that would be the place that it would be. And that there's a process section that says you submit your application and then it goes to public hearing if there's more than $100,000 of incentive and, you know, on and on.
Let's pick this up in July. Does that make sense?
I mean, I was going to just move to circulate to the taxing jurisdiction, so then we could be prepared to pass it in July.
Yeah, I could certainly do that.
And so, like, I would, if that's, I think welcome, I'd go ahead and move to amend our UTEP to include a statement that we will hold an additional public hearing in the case of an amendment to any incentive in excess of $100,000, and that we would circulate that policy change to the various taxing jurisdictions. And I so move.
Okay. All right. So that's the motion that's on the table. Jeff, is that okay? Yeah. Yeah. Discussion? Ready to vote? Duxon?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. So, good. Staff report. Heather, do you have anything?
At last month's meeting, you passed a resolution in support of additional mortgage recording tax for the Ithacan on the floor. You had modified the motion to clarify that the mortgage recording tax incentive was only allowable if that was new money. The applicant's attorney was here, checked in with the applicant, and deeply apologized that his understanding was that it was new money, but it was not. So the resolution was not circulated for signature, and nothing else needs to be done. There will be no additional mortgage recording tax incentive for the Ithacan. The Breeze, I signed closing documents on Friday, so they are set to close sometime this week. That's the Ithaca Gun Factory site. Wow. So hopefully once they close, the housing payment will go straight to the county for the Community Housing Development Fund. Off the top of my head, I want to say it's $385,000, and construction should start shortly up there on that site. I also just wanted to make you aware of a couple of things that passed right at the end of the legislative session at the state that impact IDAs. Both of these bills, of course, need to be signed by the governor, but they were passed. One would require IDAs have a representative from labor and a school district representative, either a board member or superintendent, be appointed to the IDA board. There was bipartisan support from both houses on this bill. And then the second one would require that IDAs take into consideration in their uniform tax exemption policies the extent to which the project will provide on-site child daycare facilities. This was only passed by the Democrats in both houses. The law does not require that a project have on-site daycare, only that IDAs take that into consideration in their their approval processes. So I can go ahead and draft some language for the UTEP that would be consistent with our existing language. If you so desire, I do that.
Hey, John.
Clarifying question. It's neutral on what we take away from whether or not it does, only that we somehow consider it when we're...
Well, and there's other things that in your UTEPs and in your policies, it says you will take into consideration, you know, financial impacts to the community, job creation, community benefits, vitality. It's one of those things that, you know, you want to add to your list that you certainly want to take into consideration. You might give it a little bit more consideration because it has childcare on site.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay.
So once the governor signs these, you know, I will let you know that's happened, and we'll move forward from there.
Ann.
What are the dates that, for instance, school board, and we have a member of labor on our board, that the school board member is, what are the dates that we have to do that by?
I have not seen the full language in the bills, and they haven't been signed by the governor yet, so it's not next week.
Presumably there'll be some time to comply.
Yeah.
Typically 6 months or so.
Okay. We have minutes from May 8th, 2024. Could I get Ann moves? Todd seconds. Questions or comments on the minutes? All right. All those in favor? All right. Any other business to come before the Industrial Development Agency? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.